Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/the Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. Top of the day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Lifeline. We're your hosts, life strategist and entrepreneur Bo Powell, social media influencer and owner of the For Real brand, Lindsberg Petway, and yours truly, leadership consultant and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. You can visit us at www.simplybje.com/the Lifeline and on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and now on YouTube. Today, we have a special guest news journalist, Jay Shakur at WCPO, Channel 9, an ABC affiliate there in Cincinnati, Ohio. He's a Chicago native. He's a graduate of Howard University, Kathy Hughes School of Communications with a BA in journalism and a minor in political science. In addition to his career in journalism, he's also the host of the podcast Jay Shakur Uncensored, a long-form, unedited interview talk podcast where he has conversations with individuals he finds interesting. Jay, Mr. Shakur, thank you, sir, for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. Excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
We're glad to have you, man. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. So tell us a little bit about what made you decide to become a journalist, and was that always the plan?
Mm. Um, I would say for me, what really sparked it was my grandmother. She passed September of 20, not 2019, but um, she would always watch the news when I was growing up. I was with her for a lot of my time growing up. And she would watch the news 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and she was the type that would switch between the channels. So you couldn't watch anything else, even if it was on commercial break. And I watched her so much watch the news, it kind of got annoying as a kid. And one day I asked her, like, why do we always have to watch the news? And her answer to me, so I can know what's going on about the world, right? And it kind of hit me what she was saying, but as I got older and I began more to, she took care of me, but then I began to take care of her. She would still watch the news. Um, it showed me, and then I began to learn more about her. And I learned that, she migrated from Alabama to Chicago. And she didn't finish third grade. She didn't even have a third grade
Wow.
education. But she was one of the smartest, most intelligent, most informed women that I ever knew about everything from politics to finance to everything. And long story short, she got a lot of that from watching the evening news. And I wanted to be that person that informed people like my grandmother who, may not have been as fortunate to go to college or do whatever the things that they say you're supposed to do. But they still need information to make the best, most informed decisions for their lives. And so seeing how essentially my grandmother was educated by watching the evening news, I wanted to do that. And so that's what sparked it. So I knew I wanted to do that in some form. Would it be exactly the traditional TV? I didn't know that would happen, but that came later with it. So that's what really pushed me into doing this and being in this industry.
That's amazing because I think it's just in this moment that I just realized, of course, we know the news is informative, but I don't necessarily look at news as education, but it is.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
that
I think so. I think um, a lot of times I look at myself as a teacher, right? I have a classroom. I only have a minute and 30 seconds typically, but I have a classroom of people. Now it's YouTube and our website and all that stuff. But I have a classroom of people that I get to educate them about this one particular topic um, for this amount of time. And so that's how I've kind of viewed it. That's how I kind of approached it. And that's how people receive it. That's how people come up and say, I didn't know that. When that's the greatest compliment, someone come up to me and say, I didn't know that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very relevant. My mother's 89. And
Mm,
when I come home from work and have conversations with her, she's always telling me what's going on with the world because she watches the news and CNN, from CNN to the local stations. So I think it's very apparent that some people watch the news so they can be informed, especially when they don't have a lot of conversations with friends, especially at that age. We talk amongst ourselves because we communicate with other people. But when you get a little older, I think that's very apparent that they watch the news to learn.
Definitely, definitely. I'm doing a story about I've done a story today. I'm doing a story about uh funding and the city's budget, and working through, how the city can only fund up to a certain point, and then they have to put out a request for a contract, telling people that that's how the government works, which many don't know. They just think,
Right.
the government pays for this, and this is the government building, but they don't know if the staff is probably not paid by taxpayers, but the building is paid for by taxpayers. So simple stuff like that, um, I think makes a difference in terms of helping people. Again, for me, the goal to make the best decision for their lives. They can know, okay, I like that, or I don't like that, or why is my money going to this? It should go here. Maybe I should vote this person out because they supported this. Stuff like that.
Yeah. So what made you choose this line of journalism and not sports or writing articles or different things like
hmm
that?
hmm Uh, well, I never knew it would be TV or broadcast. I my training, particularly at Howard, is in you do a lot of print. It may have changed now, but at the time I was there, you did a lot of print journalism writing. And so I knew I would write. I knew that would happen. But then TV came as an addition to that. Um, so I chose what we call general assignment news, where you pick your story based on the news of the day. I chose that more so because I get to put on different hats and learn a lot of different things. I know a little about a lot, if you will. And so one day I can be doing a story about cancer. And believe it or not, I have to learn, if I'm doing a story about breast cancer, how that works. And that helps me better do an interview with the cancer patient that I may talk to. Or the next day I may be doing a story, which I have done, about horses. I have to learn about horses, and that helps the story. And the next day I could be doing a story about um, uh, grief or whatever. And I have to learn some of the nuances of that from a psychological standpoint. Am I a specialist? Am I an expert? No, don't come to me. I can tell you anything about it, but I know enough to get through that day and that story. So I think a lot of it is about just being able to learn a little about a lot of different things. That's really why I picked this route more so than sports or the other forms of journalism. And then in this industry, you tend to find your lane, and then you concentrate on that. And so then you end up being the reporter known for this type of reporting. So you eventually get there. But for me, it's just, learning a lot of things.
Okay. So you have a podcast of your own. Tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that, how you started and how long you've been podcasting.
I started in college, but I've been doing it consistently now for about a year. I put out episode probably once a month. Um, I started that because I found, particularly my day job, I get a minute, 32 minutes on a good day, 3 minutes, and that's it. And I talk to people for sometime 45 minutes, an hour and a half, and a lot of it does not air. It does not, go anywhere beyond, editing. And so because we work in sound bites, I found there's a lot more to conversations that I have, a lot more to the people I talk to, a lot of stories that we just don't fit into our newscast, or subjects that the mainstream news, to be honest, won't touch. And so that's what provoked me to start the podcast in this iteration, in this version, this form of it, to have those extended conversations. And I get to talk to people about different things I find interesting. Um, and I get to do so as more of a neutral referee, more so than anything. Um, I will talk to anybody for the most part about anything, just to hear their thoughts on it, get them on the record about it, and hear what they have to say. So that's what really provoked me to start it this way, because there's just a lot that you just can't get on a traditional broadcast TV news. So,
But and with that, being on the news, obviously there's a lot of visibility that comes with that, you know. And so I remember some years ago I was at a event with Bishop Jakes, and one of the things he talked about was he says a lot of people want the spotlight, but they forget that the light can bring heat with it.
mhm.
And so when you have that level of visibility, I'm sure there has to be some pressure that comes along with that. So how do you manage the heat of life that comes with that level of visibility, man?
Well, I see it. I see the analogy, but for me, it to handle the quote unquote heat that comes with the visibility,
Mhm.
um, I don't I don't see myself as someone above those who may watch me, right? Or may watch our newscast. Because again, they're probably not watching for me. They're watching because they want to know what happened down the street. You know, they saw the police cars. And so I approach from that standpoint that it's not my show, it's a newscast. Um, and I have a privilege to serve them by giving them information. And so I've never really saw myself as above the quote unquote audience. I'm there as an advocate for them. I'm there to amplify their voice. I'm there to take their questions to those in power mainly. Um, I'm there for them to serve them. So that's how I view it. That's the first thing. But the second thing, or the second principle that I live by is, and I guess the best way to phrase it is being or serving as their teacher is a privilege and not my right. And so every day they turn us on or they watch me on YouTube or whatever, however they watch news, mainly digital now, um, that's a privilege. You know, they are giving me a privilege. And the next thing too, I also live by it can all be gone tomorrow. This industry is so up and down. I've seen people that I work with, they're here this week, they're at the top of it, they get fired, right? They get laid off. And so it can all be gone tomorrow. And so I try to separate my identity from my day job. And a lot of people in my industry don't necessarily do that. They attach their identity to what they do. And so when it's ripped away from them, um, they fold. Their life is completely destroyed. Of course, losing any job that pays the bills is devastating. But beyond just the financial, I don't attach my life to the position that I hold, and I don't hold the position up above, you know, the people that watch. They're the most important thing. So.
Wow.
Yeah, I like that,
Yes.
man, because from what it sounds like, it's really all about a matter of perspective and posture,
Yeah.
Yeah,
about
yeah.
how you approach that. And so was that always kind of how you saw that going into journalism, or is that something that you just kind of once you got into that lane, you kind of identified that by seeing other people's stories? Like, what kind of helped you to position yourself and approach it in that way?
Um, it kind of is watching those in my industry. Some of them have reached higher heights than I.
Yeah.
Um, Watching them and the some of their behavior, it disgusts me, to be honest. There are people that have the same role, same position that I have, that they they think they know better, or they have this sense of entitlement. And so watching those people, um, and how they move and how they act behind the scenes, that kind of provoked me to say, okay, I need to be better than that.
Wow.
Um, I have to be better than that. And so it's more so watching people make the mistakes, so I didn't make them. That's how I got to that point of focusing in on perspective and viewing it from that standpoint. Because again, it can all be gone tomorrow. Um, and again, I've seen it happen. People come in to work Monday, they're done end of day Tuesday. So, um, yeah, it's watching people take the spotlight and make it about them. One of the worst
Wow.
things, or one of the things that we as journalists try not to do, is make ourselves the story. And anytime we are the story, that is a problem. And I've seen that happen way, way too many times.
Yeah, I know a lot of my local newscasters or reporters are local celebrities. They get to host different things, and they're like, I mean, they're like really popular. So I know how you're going to answer. So I can assume how you're going to answer this based upon what you said. But perspective becomes reality. What do you think are some of the misconceptions of success?
Um, One of the biggest misconceptions of success is that being recognized for the position that you hold is flattering. I think that's one of the biggest and it depends on who you are. When it first happened, like I'll give you a logical or practical example. Um, Being recognizing you in a store the first time is like, oh wow, right? Second time, oh, that's nice. By the fourth or fifth time, it becomes you feel like your privacy is being invaded. And so I think that one of the big things that people think is that having people, they may not even necessarily know how to pronounce your name, but they know who you are and where you're from. They can look you up. Um, that that alone is that's I think the biggest misconception that's a good feeling. It's good initially, but then that dies off. I think the second thing is I thought particularly before I got to being on air, because there's a lot of people that I went to school for, majored in what I majored in, but don't make it on air. And so I thought making it on air, once you're there, you're set. Like that's when, you have it made, all you gotta do is get the next promotion. But that's not necessarily the case. I think you have to work harder to maintain that because there's so many people that want not necessarily your spot, but want to do what you do in terms of being on air that may not make it on air. You have to justify to people, particularly your management, that you're worthy of being on air in the sense of, hey, I have a work ethic, I know my information, I have sources, stuff like that. So I think the second misconception is once you reach quote unquote success, it's easier in terms of working. No, you have to work 10 times harder um, the more successful that you are. I think those are the two big things. Visibility being flattering, not always, and not, after the first initial contact, and then working hard. You have to work harder the more successful you become.
A quick
Yeah.
question. If you have more followers on social media, say you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 600,000 followers, does that give you an edge to get on air?
Um, it depends on the mentality of the managers or the management team that's going to hire you. For a lot of, I don't think that gives you an advantage. It helps. It makes you more of an asset than an employee, but I don't think it gives you an advantage. I've seen people with 20 followers, making six figures on air from their on air job. Um, it's about, I think, in particular in this industry, it's about talent. Like you, at some point, the looks are nice and all that stuff is nice, but the talent and the depth that comes through the screen. So it can help though. That type of following on social media can be an asset to a station that's trying to get more visibility for sure.
Yeah. Just as you were speaking about misconceptions, you talk about work ethic.
Hmm.
And I would think a lot of people may feel like, well, as a journalist, I mean, hey, you just get up there and they hand you a story, you talk, you know what I mean?
No.
So, but obviously there's more than that, so that's got to be something that people may have a misconception about the work that you do as well, because you talked about, hey, you got to go find stories and sources and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
mean, what does that look like to be a successful journalist? Just in case we may have some listeners who may be aspiring to that role. Like, what does it take to prepare for that? What is,
Mhm.
having a good work ethic? What does that even look like? To be, like you said, there was a lot of people that wanted to do it, went to the same school, same background, but they didn't make it. So
Mhm.
what are some things, some keys that you can tell someone who's looking to become a journalist, what they can do to, possibly get in a position like you did?
Definitely. I think you always have to have an ability to be curious. You can't get to the point where although I do see this profession as educating people. You still have to have a curiosity about you, and I always ask why. Um, no matter who it is, and I don't care if you're interviewing your favorite celebrity, you have to ask why. That's the first thing. You have to be curious. It's just the nature of a journalist. We're paid to be nosy. Um, the second thing beyond that, I think, is you have to be able to cultivate. When I say you have to go find sources, you have to be able to cultivate sources, meaning be able to talk to people not in a transactional way, because that's a mistake I find people that have come into this business after me, is
Mhm.
that their relationships are very transactional. I have a story, I have a deadline. Can you talk to me? I get that, you have a deadline, I have a deadline too, but you have to be able to just talk to people, not expecting anything from them. And then if they give you an interview or if they give you the information,
Mhm.
be thank them for it, be grateful, and but still check in. And one of the things I do, people in Memphis, I don't work in Memphis anymore. I don't cover Memphis news, but I still check in with people from Memphis for no reason. I don't need anything from them. I don't need an interview. I don't need anything from them. So number one, being curious, not being transactional, cultivate genuine relationships with people. Do so because you want to know who they are. You want to talk to them. Today, I talked to a guy. He was he was the front desk person for a local recreational center here. Started talking to him, found out he's a former basketball player. He played over in in Europe when he was younger. And just I don't need him for a story today. I'm not going to interview him today, but I just learned more about him, exchange information. We may or may not cross paths again, but I've cultivated that relationship. And if I may need him one day, I file in the back of my mind his skill set or what he does or what his expertise is. So not being transactional, being curious. And I think the third thing is kind of getting to motive. If you're doing it because you want to be on TV and you want the likes and Instagram and all that stuff, then you could be very successful and get that, right? You post something about the news or you're on the news, but particularly as a black person, it's going to get the clicks, it's going to get the likes, people are going to support you. But then number one, that's all they're going to know you for. And so if you lose that job, like I said kind of earlier, you know, what relevance do you have to people? But number two, if you're doing it just to be seeing yourself again, making yourself the story, that's a problem. So if you're trying to get into this, beyond being curious, beyond not being transactional with people, actually cultivating genuine relationships, because you never know when you may cross paths again. And I don't know how many times people I just talked to in Starbucks, I end up seeing them on a shooting scene, and they helped me with information, and I had it more, and I had it first before before my competitors and all of that. But also make sure you're doing it for the right motives, and I think the right motive for anybody that's in this business, it should be to help people by sharing information. So I think those are three basic things for anybody that's trying to quote unquote break into the business. If those things are accurate and correct, I think in terms of getting into the business, it'll be easy. Because if you genuinely want to build relationships with people, you may be building a relationship with someone who, and you can do this intentionally too, going into it, you don't have to go into it blind, but you could be building a relationship with someone who is a news director, and they hire you not because you're the best reporter they've ever seen. They've probably seen better, but because they like you as a person. And I've seen people get jobs that way too. So I think those are the three keys to breaking into this business. Really, if you ask me, any business.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like it's important to be more process driven than outcome focused. Let me
Oh, for
focus
sure.
on, cultivating relationships, because if it's all just like you said, a transaction, I'm just trying to do that, people can smell you a mile away. And it's like, yeah, bro, you're not really interested in me. You just, it's all about you. So I think that is so on point, man. And that transcends, like you said, whatever you're doing. You
Hmm.
just got to care and love on people. Everything rises and falls on relationships. So excellent point. So as we, bring this podcast to a close, we definitely want to give people an opportunity to be able to connect with you. So tell people how they can find you on TV, on podcasts, how they can find you on social media. How can people connect with you, bro?
Definitely. All social media is I am Jay Shakur. I am Jay Shakur, like Tupac,
Yeah,
Shakur. That's my middle name. I use it on air.
yeah,
And so that's social media. I write, and I push out my podcasts on all podcast platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. But the easiest way to get to all of that is jshakur.substack.com. That's where I have some of my writings, some of my news updates, separate from my day job. And then if you want to follow my work here in Cincinnati, WCPO.com /Jay Shakur, you'll be able to find me there as well. So
Awesome. How many times have people asked you were you related to Tupac?
every single time I tell people my name.
Hey, I started to.
Until you said something.
I started to
single
at the
time.
top.
Every single time. It's my middle name, though. It's my middle
Yeah.
name. My mother was a major Tupac fan. So
Oh, wow.
That's awesome, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So we can say we interviewed Tupac today.
We interviewed Tupac.
my birthday is a day before his. So almost,
Awesome,
I don't
man.
know. Something there. I don't know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you know I gotta ask, can you spit a little? Can you
No, I can't. No, I wish.
no bars, okay.
No bars.
None
Well, anyway,
whatsoever.
well, this concludes another episode of The Lifeline with your host, BJE, Lynchburg, Petway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline. And you can find us on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household. So join us and let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lynchburg Petway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.